All right. Good vach, everyone. Tonight is the celebration of the Kines HaShluchim, of the conference of all the Chabad emissaries around the world. And this year it's unique. Usually everyone travels to New York and gets together and sees people they haven't seen in a long time. And this year, because it's not in New York and it's virtual, so the advantage of this is, as Hasidim always try to find the virtue in every situation, the advantage is that it's not for a select group of people anymore. Everyone can join. And the Rebbe once said that he's saying a talk during the weekday and not on Shabbos because he doesn't want this to be misinterpreted. He wants it to be clear and recorded in a way that everyone could have access to it and to hear it. And the words he said were that every single Jew in our generation is a shliach, is an emissary of the Rebbe. And he wants to say this specifically in the weekday, so no one should have any doubt. Did he say it? Didn't he say it? Every Jew is a shliach, and this year it's more highlighted. Usually I go to New York this weekend and get recharged, and I guess the best way to get recharged is to get recharged together, to share with each other and inspire each other. I want to share with you 5 incredible stories about this concept of being a shliach, being, so to speak, a partner with a tzaddik and doing what the tzaddik asks you to do. The previous Rebbe was once talking to a chassid. If I remember correctly, the chassid's name was Reb Chatzah Fegan, and it was a chassidic gathering. And he told Reb Chatzah Fegan that he should say l'chaim. And Reb Chatzah didn't want to say l'chaim because his doctors had told him that him drinking alcohol, even a small amount, would be lethal. I don't remember exactly his the health concerns, but it was something pretty serious. So the Frierdiker Rebbe saw his hesitation. And he said to him, you shouldn't hesitate. He basically said to him, a servant of Hashem is above nature. So Chatzah is listening to the previous Rebbe and he's thinking, okay, a servant of Hashem is indeed above nature, but his thoughts were, who says I'm a servant of Hashem? As this thought goes through his mind, the previous Rebbe tells Reb Chatzah that he was once by his father, the Rebbe Rashab, and the Rebbe Rashab asked him to do something which was impossible to do in nature. And he was thinking to himself at the time, how could he possibly do this mission? And the Rebbe Rashab told the previous Rebbe, reading his thoughts, a servant of Hashem is above nature. And he thought to himself, well, who says I'm a servant of Hashem? And the Rebbe Rashab continued the conversation with himself and said, it's sufficient to be connected to a servant of Hashem. Not only is someone who's a servant of Hashem above nature, but even if you're connected to a servant of Hashem, you're also above nature. Rabbi Kivi Bernhardt told me that his father was Rebbe's. Rebbe sent him to. He was a rabbi in South Africa. He wanted to leave. And the Rebbe basically appointed him as his emissary to stay in South Africa, and he accomplished incredible things for Jewish education in South Africa. And when he was at one point really interested in leaving South Africa, his daughter wrote a letter to the Rebbe asking the Rebbe for permission from the Rebbe for her father to leave South Africa. He wanted to make Aliyah. He wanted to move to Israel. And the Rebbe kept on telling him that he has to stay in South Africa. He can't move to Israel. So at one point in the conversation, he told the Rebbe, if you want me to stay in South Africa, you're going to have to mekarev me. Mekarev literally means to bring close, as in the Hayom Yom today. Hayom Yom today is a Rabbi Isaac of Hummel said that when he came to Liazna, he came to the Alter Rebbe the first time. So, could you press mute on anyone? Thank you. So he came to Liazna the first time. So he heard the Hasidim saying a aphorism, a piskam that they had heard from those before them. The Hasidim of the Zitcha Magid and the Mendel Haradak had a statement that they had heard that was passed from generation to generation, which goes like this: love a Jew and God will love you. Do a Jew a favor and God will do you a favor. Bring a Jew close to you, and God will bring you close, and God will bring you close to him. So Kivi Bernard told me that his father was in the audience with the Rebbe. He told the Rebbe, you need to mekarev me. Mekarev means to bring someone close, to inspire them. He meant like, you're going to have to really like inspire me. The Rebbe said in response, Kiruv, being close, is a two-way street. And the Rebbe took out a pencil and a paper. The Rebbe drew a picture of a two-way street. The Rebbe said the difference between a two-way street and the one-way street is not only that the cars go both ways, but every single thing on the street, every store and every sign is made in a way that it can go both ways. So the Rebbe was emphasizing to him, in other words, the way I understood it, is that if you want to bring the Rebbe should bring you close to him, you have to share with the Rebbe and connect with the Rebbe, not just only share some things, but you have to, whatever, if you want the Rebbe to be involved, then talk and share and write to the Rebbe. On that note, not this week, the following week is the yahrzeit of Reb Mendel Alkovsky, incredible chassid, whose yahrzeit actually is on the 10th day of Kislev. 10th day of Kislev is considered the birthday of a chassid, and Mendel was an extraordinary chassid, and he shared with me the following story. There was a chassid of the Reb Marash who wanted to get a contract with the government to make pots. And it was a very competitive industry, but he managed to get the contract and he made pots for the army. But he came to the Tzemach Tzedek with a big problem. What happened was, one of his competitors was wondering how he offered such a cheap deal to the army. It's so expensive to do this, to make these pots, and how come he was able to make it cheaper than everybody else? And he hired someone to spy on him, and they discovered that they weren't putting in the right amount of metal into the pots, and they were cheating the government. And they reported this to the government, and this guy, this chassid, who was now accused of stealing from the government, was in deep trouble. So he traveled to the Tzemach Tzedek before his court case to ask Tzemach Tzedek for a blessing. So Tzemach Tzedek said, Tzemach Tzedek wasn't available. So the Gabbai of Tzemach Tzedek told him that the Tzemach Tzedek isn't, and there were certain time periods during the leadership of Tzemach Tzedek when he would not see anyone at all. He was just in his room, and people were not allowed to have audience with him at that time. Tzemach Tzedek was having guests of more important guests from other worlds, and he wasn't available at all times to talk with those who visited him. So the Gabbai said, listen, you can stand outside Tzemach Tzedek's room. Sometimes he walks out, and when he walks out, you could try to talk to him. He stayed there all day. While he's staying there, the son, youngest son of Tzemach Tzedek, the Reb Marash, sees him. He was 8 years old at the time. And he says to him, I see you're down, what's wrong? He tells him he has a problem, he's accused of the government. So the Reb Marash says, do you have any money with you? Are you carrying any money? He says, yeah, I have 300 ruble. So the Reb Marash tells him, give me the 300 ruble, you'll be successful. He gives the Reb Marash the money, and here he has the Rebbe's child telling him something. Okay, the Rebbe's child, so it's good as gold. He goes to the court case. He hasn't any advice, and the Marash just has, go, you'll be successful. He goes to the court case, which I think was in Petersburg, and the judge presiding on the case hears the argument of the attorney on behalf of the army, and the judge says this isn't really a court case. This is a open and shut story. If the pots weigh the amount they're supposed to weigh, then he's honest. If they don't weigh the amount they're supposed to weigh, that means he's cheating. Let's just weigh the pots. So they weighed the pots, and miraculously, because apparently the guy was cheating the government, miraculously, the pots weighed far more than what the government had given the metal for. The pots was weighed a lot more. So the judge got very upset at the attorney of the army. He started screaming at him, you're accusing him of stealing from the government's metals. He must have given his own metal to produce these pots because they weigh far more than what they're supposed to weigh. And he is exonerated, and he's very happy, and he travels back to Tzemach Tzedek, which at that time Tzemach Tzedek was seeing people. And he told Tzemach Tzedek, wants to thank Tzemach Tzedek for the incredible miracle and blessing that he got. He considered a blessing to Tzemach Tzedek as Tzemach Tzedek's son gave him the blessing. He thanked Tzemach Tzedek for the blessing. So after he left, Tzemach Tzedek called over his 8-year-old son, the Rebbe Menashe, says, tell me what happened over here. So he said that at the day that this man visited the city of Lubavitch, there was a chassan and kala, there was a groom and bride who needed to get married. They were orphans. They couldn't afford to make their wedding. They needed 300 ruble. Here, this guy had 300 ruble. So by divine providence, I understood that if this guy would help the chassan and kala, this would help him too. Okay. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, and what about the pots? How do the pots weigh so much more? So the Rebbe says, I put the chassan and kala in the pot, whatever that means. That's the story. And here is the fifth and final story for tonight. Actually, sorry, 2 more stories. Fourth story. Fourth story is about Mr. David Mintz. David Mintz is famous for making tofuti ice cream. When he, before he made tofuti ice cream, he was a restaurant owner. He owned a restaurants in different parts of New York. And at that time, when he opened up in the 70s, the only restaurant in Manhattan was Meal Mart on the West Side. And he opened up the first kosher restaurant on the Upper East Side. And people didn't expect to have a religious Jew there in the Upper East Side. They told him not to be successful over here, go back to Brooklyn, but he was very successful. And he wanted to open up more restaurants, and he asked the Rebbe for a blessing in every step of the way. Whenever he opened the restaurant, he always would consult the Rebbe, and he doesn't necessarily dress like a chassid, but he definitely, his attitude is completely like a chassid, and he followed exactly what the Rebbe told him. During the time he had this restaurant in the Upper East Side, he noticed a pattern. People would come to the restaurant and ask after the meal, they would ask for dessert. They wanted ice cream, but he couldn't sell ice cream. He had asked the Rebbe for a blessing. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. He asked the Rebbe for a blessing for this restaurant. The Rebbe said, be careful to serve only kosher food and you'll be successful. So at the restaurant, people would always ask him for ice cream. He told them he can't have ice cream because after fleishik, after you eat meat, you can't have dairy. There was no such thing as part of ice cream. So people said, okay, we'll buy our own ice cream. So he went to Chinatown. He tried to experiment on making his own ice cream, and nothing really came out of it. He asked the Rebbe about his experimenting on part of ice cream, and he told the Rebbe he wasn't successful. He got tofu and it wasn't really working. The Rebbe said to him, you have to have faith, and if you have faith, you can do wonders. That's the words the Rebbe said. You have to have faith. Yeah, faith can do wonders. That time, he opened up another restaurant in Manhattan on 3rd Avenue, an restaurant in Flatbush, and he asked the Rebbe about opening another restaurant on Madison Avenue, and the Rebbe said, be careful. Those words were, he didn't think that meant he shouldn't do it, and he opened the restaurant, but unfortunately, the restaurant wasn't appropriate for the local clientele, and it closed very quickly. And his other restaurant in Manhattan also closed because Donald Trump at the time bought the entire block, and he raised all the property there, including his restaurant on 3rd Avenue. So after his restaurant closed, Rabbi Riskin in New York suggested to him that he should open up another restaurant on 72nd and Broadway near his synagogue. He said, I'll advertise to my synagogue. Riskin is a very popular rabbi. He has a huge congregation. And someone in his congregation had found him a really good location for a restaurant, 72nd and Broadway. He thought it was an incredible opportunity. He, of course, asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's secretary called him and said to him, get a pencil and a paper and write this down. He writes it down. The Rebbe says, Nein b'shum oifen nisht. Nein b'shum oifen nisht. What? That means no way, no how. Again, no way, no how. B'shum oifen nisht. So he's shocked. He asked Rabbi Groner, why not? Rabbi Groner told him that Rebbe wants you to continue to work on creating Parv ice cream, and your ice cream will become very popular, and it'll be sold all over the world. Rebbe told him, and he at first was very upset because he thought this was an incredible opportunity. And another guy went in and tried to open a restaurant there, and he invested a lot of money, but he had problems from the health department, he had problems from the city, and he never opened up a restaurant. With the Rebbe's words that no man, don't do this. The Rebbe saw something that couldn't work over there, and no one else saw, and actually no restaurant ever opened up in that location. Anyways, meanwhile, he, Baruch Hashem, was successful in creating tofuti ice cream, but he wasn't really able to sell it until he went to this place in Manhattan. He brought them a tub of a 5-gallon tub of a pail of ice cream. He went to this store called Health Nuts in Manhattan. By the time he got home, they said, bring us some more. We love this stuff. Then he went to Zabar's in Manhattan, and then Bloomingdale's wanted his ice cream. And he needed to produce a lot of ice cream now because it was picking up. He asked the Rebbe for a bracha. The Rebbe said, it will be difficult in the beginning, but you have to have faith in Hashem. That's what the Rebbe said. And it wasn't the difficult, he said, because he had to make this ice cream with kettles, and he's only able to produce about 200 gallons with these kettles, and he had a much greater demand. And he told the Rebbe that he needs to get a factory, and again, the Rebbe told him that it will be difficult in the beginning, but you'll have success. And the Rebbe said to him also that there will be people who will come to offer you all kinds of money, but don't be swayed by them. Keep on doing what you're doing. Be careful. Don't get swayed by people who are offering you all kinds of money. And he listened to Rebbe, and he continued to produce tofuti ice cream, which is a great ice cream which you can get all over the world. Indeed, as the Rebbe said. That's story number 4. Story number 5. This story I heard from Rabbi Shneur Ashkenazi. You heard this from Rabbi Slavatitsky, who was present at the story. Rabbi Shabtai Slavatitsky is the Rebbe's emissary in Antwerp in Belgium, and he was once visited by Rabbi Elio Friedman from Tzfas in Eretz Yisrael, who was collecting money for the Chabad Yeshiva in Tzfas. And he went around trying to collect money. Antwerp is there's a big diamond industry there, and at least had a big diamond industry there at the time. And he tried to collect money, but he was not so successful. He told Rabbi Slavatitsky, you know people in town, please come with me. So Slavatitsky brought him to a very, very wealthy Jew named Mr. Nussbaum. Mr. Nussbaum was a guy, like the president. It's really hard to get an appointment with him, go through one secretary, a second secretary. And they had an audience with Mr. Nussbaum, and they went, with love and awe, trying to present their case about the yeshiva and Tzfas. And Rabbi Friedman tries to open his heart, tells him one story and a second story, and tries to share with him, and hoping that Mr. Nussbaum, who was this fabulously wealthy person, would agree to support the yeshiva and Tzfas. Mr. Nussbaum says, I'm going to help you. I have actually a lot of money for Lubavitch. You guys are from Lubavitch, right? Yes, we're from Lubavitch. I have a lot of money for Lubavitch. I actually put away for Lubavitch. But before I give you the money, I want to tell you the story. Okay? He said, a number of years ago, I had an opportunity to invest in a certain industry. I think it may have been in metals, I'm not sure. And it was a considerable investment, and I wasn't sure if I should do this. I myself am not such a chassid of the Rebbe, but I know where I can go to ask for a blessing, and I decided to ask the Rebbe about this. The Rebbe asked me, how much do you think you would be able to gain revenue from this deal? How much do you think you can make on this deal? So I told the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, the amount that you estimate that you can make revenue on this deal, you should put aside 20% of the revenue, of the profit, and put that aside for tzedakah. And in that merit, the Eibishter Hashem promises us in the Torah that you give it tzedakah, Hashem give you success. So you put away, before you even enter the deal, put away the 20% of what you're going to make. Let's say you plan like $1 million, put away $200,000 and put that away to give to tzedakah. So the guy is so excited. He has such clear guidance from the Rebbe. The Rebbe's exactly what's going to happen. So he thinks about how much it's going to make. He puts the 20% aside, and he goes on a vacation. He doesn't even look at the numbers, doesn't look at the deal. When he comes back after this long vacation, he asks his employees what's going on with this investment. Not only had this investment not made money, it had gone down significantly, but he held on. After a few months, he lost 30% of his initial investments. He wrote to the Rebbe. He wasn't a chassid, so he wrote with the proper insolence of someone who was given advice, and the advice doesn't seem to pan out. And he writes a very insolent letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe responds to him, and he tells the Rebbe, you told me that I'm going to make money, and I didn't make any money. And I lost money. I want to sell it now. I want to sell. So the Rebbe said, you should not sell. Don't touch it. The Rebbe said, if a Jew promises to give tzedakah, Hashem promises in the Torah that he'll be successful. So it's impossible that you're going to lose. The Rebbe said, it's impossible you're going to lose. You promised to give tzedakah. It's impossible you're going to lose. Don't touch this. Okay. He listened. He didn't touch it. And after a while, the market changed, and it started to arise, started to ascend, and he came to a point where he was able to recap what he had lost. He wrote to the Rebbe again, can I sell it now? The Rebbe said no. And Baruch Hashem, he made far more than he thought he was going to make. And he tells a story to Rabbi Savatitsky and Rabbi Friedman, and he says, listen, the Rebbe's words are true. The Rebbe is a Tzadik. And, I know that the Rebbe's words are prophetic, and I'm not so impressed by that. What I'm impressed is not that the market goes up, the market goes down. The Rebbe's put his word on the line. The Rebbe, that's not really what surprised me. What's unique about the Rebbe is, he says, is these words. Only a Rebbe could say these words. If a Jew made a promise to give tzedakah, Hashem promises in the Torah that he will be successful. It can't be that he won't be successful. Only a Rebbe could say that. Only a Rebbe could say those words. If Hashem promises in the Torah he'll be successful, of course he'll be successful. So those are the 5 stories I wanted to share tonight. Thank you, David Issaver and Rebberal and Yehuda Yaron and Charlie for listening to these stories, and anyone else who joined. The point that I'm trying to convey with all these stories is that now it's a Knesset Shluchim, and the Rebbe gives us an opportunity to partner with him in the Rebbe's work in preparing the world for the coming Mashiach. It's not just about something that's going to happen. Just the very fact that Jew partners with a tzaddik, it opens up a pipeline of tremendous blessing. But that's not really the main thing. The main thing is that we need the Mashiach to come right away, and we have to consider this incredible moment in history now when there's a Knesset Shluchim, the gathering of Tzadikim, the Gemara says, the gathering which is good for them and good for the world. And let's be a part of it. Let's be a part of this incredible endeavor to spread the Torah and its commandments and the Chassidus and the good news, the coming Mashiach. And it shouldn't just be news, we should see it with our eyes. Karav Mamish. Good Tavach, everybody.
Where do I go to?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, guys. Don't go. Whoa, don't go. We're going to short Living Torah video now. Chaim Marcus is working on it. Oh, I didn't know that.
It was the summer of 1968, 770 Eastern Parkway. I got to see the Rebbe in a meeting that changed my life. I asked the Rebbe my questions, which were the questions of a young sophomore student. And the Rebbe gave me answers. He got through them quite rapidly, as if he really wanted to get to the point which my questions ended and his questions began. And that was the extraordinary moment when he suddenly did a role reversal. How many Jewish students were there at Cambridge? How many came along to the Jewish Society? We estimated in those days there were about 1,000 Jewish students, about 100 came to the Jewish Society, so we were losing 90% of our Jewish students. And the Rebbe started saying, and what are you doing about it? And I really didn't expect this because I never saw myself as a leader or somebody involved in, as it were, reaching out. And I suddenly realized the Rebbe was challenging me to go and lead. Instead of complaining about things in Jewish life, to do something to make Jewish life better.
Wie bald, als hat eine Idee, eine kann auftun, in der Minium von Niedigkeit, sie das ist in Limit der Teile, sie das ist in Kima Mitzvahs, bis a viele Millionen Horeshus, die Guffe, was sie zu ihm der Geingen, das Guffe sei hoch. Das ist eine Rede, ein Schliches, was darf durchführen.
A year or so later, I graduated as a student. And that meeting was still with me. And so instead of going straight into a career, I went off to Kfar Chabad to learn in the Lubavitch Yeshiva there. Just before going out there, I just got engaged. And I realized that if I stay in this place for a very long time, I'm going to become a completely different person, which was okay by me, but it wasn't fair on the lady that I got engaged to. And so after we'd got married and I'd had a career teaching secular philosophy, it still wouldn't let me sleep at night. That meeting and the content of that meeting stayed with me and haunted me from time to time.
Das ist der Zav Hasho und der Drishas Hasho und der Hechrech Hasho, wo ma viele haben, Mekayim Nefesh Achas Misro, ist Echet Mekayim Kilo Kiyim Elo Mole.
I stopped teaching philosophy and studied for Smicha. And I went to see the Rebbe. I felt the time has come for the next big moment in my life. What do I do? My choices were, should I become an academic? Should I become an economist? Or should I become a lawyer? And he said no to being an academic, no to being an economist, no to being a lawyer. He said, your job is to teach rabbis.
The Rabboni was seine mehrere Mumche in Jone Iser Vehete. Rabboni was seine mehrere Mumche in Jone Momen. Al der Sechet Rabboni was die Ikle seine Mumche. Was zu machen seine Forsches mit Israel. Al Idea Botzes hat Telo mit Viser in Jone Yadus Bichlal was Sechet Kilo bechol der Checho Doel. Und das verleiht doch einen speziellen Zugang. Bedarf Kinei und betekent eine Masse mit allen Unionen, was bedarf mehr für sein Jahr.
He said, that's your job. You have to go to Jews college, you have to train rabbis. And because they will have to learn from you not just what you need to learn to be a rabbi, but also how to do things like give sermons. Essentially, you sent me the task of becoming a congregational rabbi and at the same time teaching congregational rabbis for smicha. Now, when I came back to Anglo-Jewry, of course, I immediately discovered that such a thing was not possible in Anglo-Jewry. If you were a congregational rabbi, you could not take even 1 hour of paid employment outside of being your congregational rabbi. I went back and told my Rav, who was the head of Jews College, Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich. Rabbi Rabinovich was anything but a Lubavitcher Chassid. But as soon as he heard that, he said, if the Rebbe said it, that's what you have to do. He picked up the phone to the chief rabbi, Lord Jacobovitz, and told him the story and said, if it's against the rules of the United Synagogue, you're just going to have to change the rules of the United Synagogue. Rabbi Jacobovitz heard that from him, agreed, phoned up the president of the United Synagogue, told him, we're going to have to change the rules of the United Synagogue, and it was done.
Die alle, was vernehmen sich mit das Konnes Ziburis, darfen wissen sein, dass das tun sie ist, gibt es solche Zibur bei Mono, die sich nicht so von Pirush Aposhut, also tut das Konnes mit der Mono, nichts mit verschiedene Pnis, Bilte Teheres, nur rechet bei Mono, was es anäßig bis solche Zibur, der Pfarrer lebt in dem Ebischen. Und wie bald lebt in dem Babyschten, aber der Babyschte hat mal weggestellt. In Azamid, Maimid und Matze, was konnte, in solche Zibur, ist das gut für Parem Eichoch und das ist Parem genug, als darf, was tun.
In 1990, I was a candidate to be chief rabbi in Britain and the Commonwealth. I was very unsure. I mean, that's a big job for somebody who did not initially plan to be a rabbi. I felt also it was a family decision. What did Elaine, my wife, feel about it? It's big public exposure. So I said to Elaine, do I have your permission to ask the Rebbe? Because when you ask the Rebbe, you do what he says. It's not just advice. Here is a man who really understands the global picture, and when he tells you to do something, you have to do it. Elaine said yes, and so I wrote to the Rebbe, putting the pros and the cons, the reasons for, the reasons against. And then I wrote, should I, if offered the job, accept it? He answered without writing a single word. He had the typographical symbol for reverse word order, and he wrote it around the word should I. In other words, his answer was, I should.
Last night in London, Jonathan Sacks became the new chief rabbi, the figurehead for the whole of Anglo Jewry, one of the most influential rabbis in the world.
The Rebbe taught me something very important, that the most transformative moments in your life happen when somebody else believes in you more than you believe in yourself.
This production is made possible through the generosity of the members of the GEM Foundation.
Erzähl die Gemorra, in was besteht die Gadlus von Rebchien, in Kalmogdeli Meise hier. Dafke in seine Meise, in was bestanden die Meise, wie die Gemorra dort Meirich, als ist allein gegangen, haben Zwie, haben Hirschen. Und danach hat von der von sehr viel gemacht, klar. Und auf dem Klapp umgeschrieben Chamische Kumsche Teile. Und hat das voneinander geteilt zu Chamische Jenuke. Und jeder nach Chumisch und dann noch gesagt, dass jeder soll dann noch gehen lernen mit dem Zweiten. Was Lichiere ist nicht verstandig, gehen hat mal Hirsch, der sie gekonnt schicken seine Talmidim oder auch viele nicht von den Talmidim, nur ein von Samayiden. All der sehr machen von dem klar, also und dann noch schreiben die Chumoshim, weil der sehr wie die Gemorre dort Mamschir bei der Geh zu Shisha, Sidre Mishne I was da gewesen, was Rapschie hat das allein getan, was sie durch Muvan hat es nicht gekonnt, sitzen dich im Besmedrisch, lernen dich mit den Talmidim, die Breisis und Mischnis, von Terische Balpeo und Piroshehem, hat man hier, darf man risken Besode, der Bier bepasst, war was Tage, verlassen sich nicht auf den anderen, setzt man das sehr bepeilt. Wie ein Schlier soll nicht sein, ein Nehmen wie Schlichusse. Und mit dem Geben ein Schlichus, soll gehen, fangen nach Hirsch und machen klar und nun schreiben komisch. Können nicht tun mit Asamin Hidur, mit Asamin Risus, mit Asamin Lebendigkeit, nicht haben die dieselbe Havone, was so in Gadlus Hatero, seit Terische Bixab Humoshim, seit Terische Balpe, die Shisha Sidre Mishne. Aber das ist echt die Nekuda, was Aris nehmen von der Hisvadus, die Mijuchot mit Kufaseno Zu, Azafal Piva, der Eberster Bechazde hat uns weggestellt. In Amaime Dumatza, was sie nicht verbunden mit Messias Nefesh Bepeil, mit Zakonas Nefoshes Bepeil, wie sie gewähnt verbunden, wie Medina Hahi, in der Chibekis Bahanegeya, zu den Jonen, wie sie seinen Messias Nefesh und Pekuach Nefesh Begashmirs. Bahanegeya aber zu Pekuach Nefoshes Beruchnis, Zarzolos Nefoshes, die Sakone, Dafki Medinas Horwoche, und dort, wo sie nicht da keine Mechizis, auf was sie seinen Mavdul ben Israel Loami, und Mavdul ben Kedesh Lechem, bis an nicht die Mechizis ben Lecheshech, und wie mir sagt das, bei Veneseno Arabim, Lezareno Arab, an der Lepel, was sie jeder Tag gehen verloren, Nishomes von Bnei und Bnei Israel, was Chas v'Sholem sagen auf eine Nishoma, auf Jeden, als ist im Ganzen verloren, aber verloren in dem Muvon, mit Daffen mit dem Ton morgen abbringen und nennt zur Jüdischkeit, wird es in Daffen Ton in mehrere Unionen und darf sie da wieder wird Ton kommen, mit der Sache mehr Schwierigkeiten, bis wann es wird der Sophie, sie wird morgen treffen, es kann sein, wird morgen nicht wissen, wo gefindet sich. Wo der Pfarrer ist Koomo, wie Rasholela heilig in den Jonim Hamitzarim, auf wie viel das ist ein Inyan, Ikri, und ein Inyan Shiyuni, und ein Inyan von Pekuach Nefoshes Mamosh, aber soll Reis nehmen, der Hero, und der Hero soll Reis in Meise bepehren. A jeder Nesef Avdru, was tut bei Momene. Nesef Avdru, was tut bei Nishmose, alle Dei, Lil Medula Lamed, soll Reichiton begufe, wann geht a Potzas a Yadus, und bei Meise bepehl, gehen bepehl, Mamesh begufe, und reden bepehl, Mamesh befi, und bei Weisen a lebendigen Beispiel bepehl, Mamesh beramach Evrov, Bishasag Gida, was mit darf lernen, Teil und Mekayim sein ihre Mitzvahs, wo mal viele haben, Mekayim Nefesh Achas Misro, ist Echet Mekayim, Kilo Kiyim, Elo Mole, Alachas Kama Vekama, wie Mezetos Bepeil, Abekeche Shol Kol Echad Achas, was nimmt auf sich gehen, Mefit sein Yadus, zwischen Iden, hat mich schön gesehen, aber seine haben Masel gewähnt, Kammer, wie Kammer eine Forsche ist, und Masel gewähnt in Asami Neffen, wie gerät früher bei der Gehe, zu Meise Chia, die, wenn es haben Masel gewähnt, seine dann noch geworden Mazibin, seine geworden Echet Maschpien, und Afghen und Masel sein Iden, was einander was zu sehen, gekonnt zukommen, mese zibische Tier.
With materials from the Living Archive established by the Rohr Family Foundation.